Time for convening having arrived. The Senate will come to order. Would ask unauthorized visitors to exit the chamber at this time, and the Senate will come to order. First reading in reference of Senate. Excuse me, I'm already jumping ahead. Chair recognizes Senator from the 53rd.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I know that we have a hard-working Lieutenant Governor that's eager to get busy. But the journals from the 12th day and the 13th day have both been read and found to be correct.
Thank you, Senator, for your good works on the journal. Is there objection dispensing with the reading of the journal? Chair is none. The reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? Chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators having bills and resolutions to introduce, please bring them to the Secretary's desk at this time. First reading in reference of Senate bills and resolutions.
Senate Bill 331 by Senators Harper the 7th and Ligon of the 3rd. A bill to be entitled an act to amend
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 332 by Senator Stone of the 23rd and Crosby of the 13th.
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 333 by Senators Tolleson of the 20th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section
Natural
12.
Resources.
Senate Bill 334 by Senators Carter of the 1st. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 31 of the OCGA relating to general provisions.
Insurance Committee.
Senate Bill 335 by Senator Jones of the 25th and others. A bill to be entitled an act.
Regulated Industries.
Senate Resolution 820 by Senator Hill the 32nd. A resolution creating the Senate Entrepreneur in Residence
Economic Development.
That completes the order, Mr. President.
Clerk will read bills, standing committees.
Mr. President, the Senate State and Local Government Operations Committee has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. That House Bill 664 do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Ligon of the 3rd District Chairman. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Clerk will read bills for the second time.
Senate Resolution 735. That completes the order, Mr. President.
It's now time for the morning roll call. Morning roll call. Motions to excuse. Chair recognizes Senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I make a motion to excuse the senator from the 33rd and the 2nd.
33rd and 2nd. Without objection, the two senators will be excused. Chair recognizes the majority leader.
Mr. President, I move to excuse the senator from the 1st and the senator from the 18th for business outside the Capitol.
1st and 18th, without objection, the senator will be excused. Chair recognizes Senator from the 34th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 36 years in round.
36, without objection, she will be excused. Chair recognizes distinguished senator from the 56th.
Unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 37th for business inside the Capitol.
32nd, without objection, the senator will be excused. Chair recognizes senator from the 40th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the gentleman from the 29th for business outside the Capitol.
29th, without objection. Senator will be excused. Are there any other motions to excuse? Chair, who? 32nd? Chair recognizes Senator from the 32nd.
There may be clarification. I'm of the 32nd. And they may have said the 37th that needs to be excused, so just want to confirm that the senator from the 37th is here.
37th. We have 37th. Senator from the 37th excused. Is that accurate? The senator from the 37th is excused. The senator from the 32nd could never be excused. Senator from the 5th, you have someone, or you? We're good? All right. Any other? Senator from the 3rd is recognized.
Mr. President, I move that we excuse the senator from the 1st.
He's already been excused. Yep. He has already been excused. Are there any other motions to excuse? The Secretary will call the roll of senators. Please signify your presence by voting the yea switch. Secretary will unlock the machine. It is now time for our morning devotion. I would ask that senators please take your seats, cease conversation as we prepare the chamber for our morning devotion. Doorkeepers, if you would, please secure the chamber. And it is now my distinct honor to call upon the very distinguished the distinguished senator from the 30th District, Senator from Carrollton, to introduce our chaplain and lead us in our pledges.
Thank you, Mr. President. If y'all would stand and join me in saying the pledge to our national colors.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now to the Georgia flag.
I pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag and to the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, moderation.
Thank y'all, and just so I don't forget it, I want to welcome Angelus Ricks over there and Brother Mike for making sure that the pastor of the day made it all the way from Carrollton and to get us started on the right foot today. Now, I knew Reverend Ricks as Coach Ricks well before I knew him as Reverend Ricks. As my son was playing football at Carrollton High School, Coach Ricks was one of the coaches of the football team, and I used to go out and watch him at practice sometimes and at every one of the games. And I really admired the passion at which he went about mentoring, teaching, and coaching those young men. It really stood out to me. And then he invited me to come to his church, listen to one of his services. Now, I'm Catholic. To say our services are a little structured may be an understatement, but I went, and it was an experience. It was, I was standing in a row. I had the lady on my left crying. I had the lady on my right with her arms raised and glee and just full of worship. I'd never experienced anything like that, and it made a strong and positive impact on me. So when I got the opportunity to have a pastor of the day, I wanted to make sure that I got Reverend Ricks to come up here and talk to us. So if y'all would help me welcome Reverend Fred Ricks. Thank you.
It is certainly a pleasure to stand here in your presence this morning. And they told me I only had 5 minutes, and I promise you I'm going to get all 5 of them. I take my time and move real quickly, but it's come to mind as a devotion thought will be out of Psalms 133:1. It said, how good it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. And if I had to put a thought that you can remember, would be, where do we go from here? And that's what I want to ask the question. That's the question that people ask us all the time, where do we go from here? And the key nugget is unity. And when we come together, we can be real successful. And being a football coach, I often tell my football players, anytime we go out to fight, if we fight with our hands separated, we will break. But when we come together, we'll be even more powerful. It's something about unity that when you come together, it has what I call a domino effect. It affects everything that's under it. Everything that's under it can feel it. It's as precious as the ointment fell down Aaron's beard. Where do we go from here is all about us. Are we willing to lay aside our agenda? Are we willing to come together for the common good of all mankind? We must remember that in what we do, it is not about us. It's all about him. And God has chosen us to be vessels. Where do we go from here? We need unity. We need unity. We must come together. We must quit pointing fingers and blaming people. Unity is the key. Unity is the key. It's the strength. That's how we can take our steps. That's how we can fight. Because when people see that we come together, the enemy gets mad. One thing I do understand, that the enemy can't stand unity. For a divided house cannot stand. If we're going to continue to be a strong state in which Georgia is, we must continue to come together. I thank God for this opportunity. But where do we go from here? How good it is for brethren and sisters to dwell together in unity. And as I bow, will you bow your heads with me in a word of prayer? Almighty and eternal God, you know the longing of men's heart, and you protect their rights. In your goodness, watch over them. The authority that the people, wherever they may be, may enjoy freedom, security, and peace. You guide and govern everything with order and love. Look upon the assembly of our leaders that are here this morning. Hold them, God, in the hollow of your hand. May you always act in accordance with your will and decision for peace be our well-being. We thank you, God, thank you for the unity. We thank you for every person that's bowed under the sound of my voice. We thank you for this session. And I pray right now, God, for our great nation. And then I pray for our great state. Thank you, God, as we experienced bad weather, that all didn't come out all right, but we all made it okay. We give you praise. In your name we pray. Let everyone say amen.
Are there any unanimous consents? Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? Chair recognizes Senator from the 42nd. 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nice to be back with all of you. These last few days here, I know, have been both unbelievable and unforgettable. And this traffic and weather event is really a tale of two responses. The first response we all saw was an uplifting one. Emergency workers, law enforcement, working around the clock, the brave men and women of our National Guard who always come out when we need the most. They should be commended. The regular, everyday citizens of our state who brought water and granola bars. We were just talking about the folks that got on their four-wheelers and carried warm drinks to people, and folks giving perfect strangers medicine, rides, delivering babies on the interstate. The businesses that opened their doors and let folks sleep in the aisles, and the Home Depots that had folks sleeping on patio furniture. And we all think of the school teachers and the bus drivers that were put in impossible situations, and yet they still showed the same commitment and the same love for those students that they always do. And like all of you, I'm proud of that response from the everyday citizens of the state. I feel like Georgians were seen to really have stepped up to the plate. And they deserve to be congratulated and lifted up for that response to this disaster. I was proud of them. I know you all are too. And then there was our state government's response. And everyone agrees that that preparation and response let those citizens down. And I've heard from many of those citizens, many of you are outraged and angry and embarrassed. And believe me, as I saw young children sleeping on buses in the freezing night, and elderly women stranded on the highway with no access to restrooms, I understand the anger and the embarrassment, especially because this is the second time in 3 years. But the governor has apologized. There's going to be an investigation into what happened, and there's no point today in trying to lay blame. Again, we find ourselves in a situation where we have to just talk about the lessons learned and see and ensure that it won't happen again. In that regard, I have a couple thoughts that I would like to share. Number one, I agree with the people who have called, who have acknowledged that we have to incorporate a traffic plan into any emergency preparedness response, not just for snow and ice, but for any type of disaster. I know that many of you are going to work together with me and others to make sure we solve that problem. And secondly, there's two fundamental principles of emergency management that have to guide our preparation and response in the future. Number one, we have to have unified and coordinated command and communication as soon as possible. And number two, we cannot get behind, because as soon as we're trying to respond to a crisis, it's too late. Now in Metro Atlanta, we have so many city and county governments, so many school districts. The coordination essentially has to happen at the state level. And that means that the governor in the future must declare a state of emergency early and take charge from the very beginning. The emergency management plan that we have only works. It's designed to centralize that command. It's designed to coordinate with the local emergency response, but it can only do that if the governor takes command early, declares a state of emergency. Now, I understand that that is a difficult decision. No one is claiming that it's an easy decision, and I know that there will undoubtedly be public criticism when a governor takes charge in that way and a storm doesn't materialize. I recognize that. It's a difficult job. And again, no one is laying blame today. But we have seen in Metro Atlanta at a minimum the need for the coordination, the need to be out in front, and the need to have the governor take that command from the very beginning. So the stakes are just too high to be hesitant. I appreciate, again, the incredible response that we received from our citizens. And I know all of you do, and the emergency response, I walked in with the state troopers today and just said thank you. And that's my overwhelming emotion is thanks to the people who really stepped up to the plate in this regard. And I know we won't forget it, and I know we'll do better next time. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 56th. 56th.
Thank you, Mr. President. My fellow senators, we always know there's much to learn from any disaster and always opportunities to improve. However, I hope everyone takes a moment to realize how Georgians did come together. Here's a small example of ordinary people doing extraordinary things the last few days. Sandy Springs police officer aided a new father as he delivered a baby on I-285. School teachers and staff worked 36 hours straight taking care of students. People with four-wheel drive cars got home, but then they went back out to bring people food, gas, and give them rides home. A father in Buckhead walked 6 miles in the snow to be with his daughter so she wouldn't spend her first night away from home alone. Business owners opened their doors, provided food and shelter at no cost. City of Roswell and the state of Georgia towed people's cars to nearby parking lots and didn't charge them a dime. Homeowners opened their homes to perfect strangers to provide a meal and a warm place to stay. People brought food and sleeping bags and pillows to their local elementary, middle, and high schools so the kids could sleep in the gym. Firefighters, police officers, and soldiers did what they do best. We served and protected. Random acts of kindness were in abundance from neighbors, coworkers, friends, and strangers. A woman in Cobb County set up a Facebook page so people could post where they are and what they needed using technologies from their phones to their computers to help their fellow Georgians in need. My fellow senators, God is good all of the time. And the last 3 days, while it'd be challenging, they were a shining example of Georgia and America. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 26th. On second thought, oh, there he is, yeah.
Good morning to all my good friends and fellow senators, Mr. President. I'm here this morning. I'm going to drop a bill, and I hope many of you will decide to sign on. In representing rural communities, I found out that health care is a big problem. Several communities have closed hospitals, Montezuma, Calhoun, Hancock County. In Hancock County, 39% of the folks who have heart attack or stroke die. They have an FQC, but after 5 o'clock, that's it. Nothing on the weekend and nothing on the holidays. So what I've tried to come up with, and I've talked to the folks from the Georgia Hospital Association to try to get this discussion started. Basically, what this bill does, it adds an exemption under the CON law, and what it says is this: stabilization centers in rural counties which provide for the observation and stabilization for immediate transfer of patients requiring care to an acute hospital. Under Georgia Code, it defines what a rural county is. And it says, rural county means a county having a population of less than 35,000 according to the United States Decennial Census of 2000 or any future such census. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what this will do is give those communities who don't have the tax base an opportunity to have a facility that they can get their loved ones to observation, 2 or 3 observation beds, get those folks stabilized, and then get them transferred to an acute care center hospital. And that basically what it does is keep us as loved ones running 85, 90 miles an hour down the road trying to get our loved ones to somewhere so that they can be seen about. Now, we have this problem in Georgia, and I think it's time for us to address it. We're not a third world country. We have the resources. It's just how we do it. And so this morning, I will introduce this bill and hope that many of you will decide to sign on. I'm in an urban area and don't have to worry about health care. But in those rural communities that I do travel in and that I do represent, have that immediate problem. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 41st for a point of personal privilege.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, appreciate you having me speak today on this important occasion. We've been through a real challenging time. Like others, if the state was lax, I make my apologies that we didn't have it in the right place to do all that we could have done. To the families that suffered, we appreciate the struggle that you went through, and we're glad that we're through it. And as a legislative body, we need to do our part to make sure that we look forward and try to do the right thing to make sure this, if it happens again in any form, that we've done all we can to mitigate any problems and concerns and challenges of the people of Georgia. So I would ask the Lieutenant Governor to seriously consider appointing a bipartisan commission or possibly having members of the Senate to look at these issues surrounding this latest storm, the challenges we face, to see if we can make recommendations to the governor and the rest of the government to improve things. If there may be some legislative initiatives, whether it's budgeting for GEMA, or budgeting for other departments to make sure that we're in a proper status to combat issues that arise that may be challenging to Georgia's public. So I would hope that we would maybe look at these issues proactively ahead of time and try to be ready for the next challenge that face Georgia citizens. I also want us to use this as something that kind of wakes us up. We saw the challenges when Georgians hit the roads at the same time, but we see challenges every morning when we come to work. We see challenges on our roadways when we see heavy rains. A few years ago, bipartisan support and bipartisan opposition too for a T-SPLOST occurred. But most everyone, whether you're for that method of funding transportation initiatives or not, felt that we had an infrastructure problem, especially in Metro Atlanta, but all over the state, that we needed to fund our roads. And as we move forward as a legislative body, let's not wait till the next emergency, because the next emergency may just be a daily occurrence. We already see a heavy rain. Again, my trip to the Capitol when there's no traffic is maybe 26 minutes. When the rush hour, it's 45, and if it's raining, it's an hour and 15 or an hour and 30. That is because we have a fragile interstate system to meet the demands that we have placed upon it. That is because we as legislators have not found the funding solutions we need to make sure that we're ready for the next century. We're ready for full employment, because if there's more people working, there's more people on the roads. And we need to make sure that we look at the entire tools available for transportation. Georgia should have done more on multimodal forms of transportation and alternative forms than cars. Georgia should have done more, I think, in helping, whether it's through MARTA or other ways, to fund rapid transit. So I hope that we will use this as something that gives us a little kickstart to look at the needs that are out there and move in the right direction. I thank you, and I appreciate all the work the members of this chamber have done, and I ask you to look in the future and try to prepare us for the next 50, 100 years. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 39th. Senator from the 39th be recognized for a point of personal privilege.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, I rise on a point of personal privilege to speak directly to one segment of the citizenry. I want to make a special apology for what happened this week to the children of the state of Georgia. You saw the heartbreaking scenes of children stranded on buses, unable to go home to their mothers and to their fathers. You saw the images of parents distraught, at wit's end, and we cannot measure the trauma, the psychological trauma that those children have undergone over these past 4 days. So I want to apologize directly to those children because they were not in control. Those children look to what? Us, grown-ups, to make things right. And it is an apology separate and apart from others that should go out to the children of this state, to the school children. I want to echo what the minority leader had to say. You know, and I understand that the governor is going to do an internal review. At the same time, it is absolutely necessary, in my estimation, that we create a bipartisan, unpolitical, non-political process by which we can truly understand what happened and what did not happen. I hope the majority party will agree with us, put together a nonpartisan or a bipartisan commission. I hesitated to call it a blue ribbon commission, but a commission which will look at these things objectively and answer some questions, not the least of which is why after 2011 we are in the same, if not worse, position than we were in 2014. The public, I think, is demanding answers, and they deserve answers, and we should give them the answers. One part of this that I want to mention in particular is the issue of towed cars. I understand that there are some counties that are requiring the citizens who were towed to pay for those towing, their car being towed. I would submit to you that the citizens weren't responsible for this fiasco. We were, the people that they elect to serve. And there are several counties and cities who are not charging citizens, but there are some, including my home county of Fulton and I believe Cherokee, Gwinnett, and a few other counties are requiring people to pay for those towings. I sent an email last night to the governor asking the governor to use his powers and his resources as the chief executive officer of the state to compensate any person whose car was towed who is not being reimbursed or paid for by the locality. I think that is the least that an apologetic state can do. And the last thing I want to say, there are those who have talked about, well, the streets were cleared in the city of Atlanta, and 80% of the streets were cleared in the city of Atlanta. I want to know where they were, because the streets that I saw and the streets that I reported were reported to me in my district: Cascade Road, Camilton Road, and Lee Street, which I spent several hours on Tuesday night, were not cleared. What we should do less of is spin and messaging and more of straight talk to the citizens. You know, some people need to understand that petulance is not a plan. Confrontation is not a strategy when it comes to helping the citizens of the city of Atlanta. Mr. President, I appreciate this opportunity to speak to the citizens of the state, and I retire from the well.
We'd like to introduce our doctor of the day. We're very, very proud of the good doctor for joining us and taking care of us, and I'd like to recognize the distinguished senator from the 6th to introduce our doctor of the day.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we are honored to have Dr. Angelo Galante, who is a board certified in family practice. He is originally from the Bronx and graduate of Albany Medical College. Dr. Galante conducted his residency in SUNY at Buffalo and completed his sports medicine fellowship at Houston Clinic in Columbus. Dr. Galante is the current team and staff physician at Georgia Institute of Technology's Student Health Center. He's also a neighbor of mine in Smyrna, and it's my honor to welcome him here today. Doctor?
Thank you. I will keep it very brief. Thank you for serving us all in the state, and I'm here all day. Please stop by if you have any needs. I'd be happy to help you and meet all of you. Take care.
Good deal. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Thank you. Chair recognizes Senator from 33rd on a point of personal privilege. Please give the Dean of the Senate your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, y'all might want to stand up and stretch for a minute. I got a few thousand words I want to say.
There's a 3-minute time limit. Don't forget, Senator.
Let me just say, in all seriousness, I was one of those on the road for 9 hours the other night. I've never seen anything like it. It was an anomaly. It's never happened before. It's an unusual thing to have happened. I've heard the news media blame the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker, the DOT commissioner, and the head of GEMA, and the mayor of Atlanta. To his credit, the mayor of Atlanta said, you know, we do have to take some responsibility for letting everyone go at first, and I think a plan in the future would be maybe with the governments and industry having some sort of plan under states of emergencies. But I had the opportunity of serving as the national chairman for transportation for the NCSL one year, and I learned a whole lot. And let me tell you something. If you want to place the blame, go back 60 years and talk to those fellows who pulled up all the trolley lines. With right-of-way, we'd never be able to recover again, so that we could have light rail that ran everywhere and interconnected. Truly, when we had the opportunity in Georgia to pass transit and rail transit, my county and several others turned it down twice. And I think we know why. I'm not proud of that. But when the transportation omnibus bill passed in the 90s, it was ICE-T, Intermodal Surface Transportation Act, and then T-21 6 years later. And it gave us all kind of opportunities to have different types of pots of money to have multi-modes of transportation. We tried then to build an intermodal center in Atlanta. Well, we couldn't pass it, and I'm going to tell you why, and I don't want the rural folks to get upset with me, but it's true. The rural people were put in charge for appropriations for years in Georgia because the city of Atlanta was at one time too powerful and didn't want to take their share of road money needed, which is understandable. And the chairs of the Transportation Committee, and I'm not talking about the former senator from the 14th or our current appropriations chair, because he's been as reasonable as any person I've ever met. But we didn't fund transit because we never could convince the rural areas that even though 65% of the money in this state comes from 20 counties, 65% of that money goes back to rural Georgia. So we're kind of shooting ourselves in the head. And we've never really explained it and had the dialogue we needed to between the executive legislative branch and the executive branch. My message is simple. Everybody shares some blame. Nobody needs to be picked on about this. But let me say this. Something needs to happen. If not this year in the budget, the next 3 years, we need to fund some transit that has to do with mobility from one county to the next. I'm proud to say that one governor in the late 90s, you probably know who I'm talking about, passed Greta. That was powerful enough the way it was written to run over any county that wasn't reachable. But it wasn't used. It was almost disbanded, and we lost another opportunity. Again, no one person's to blame, no one department. You've got a good transportation commissioner over there. He's an engineer. Thank God an engineer's over there. And I just want to tell you that next 3 years, we better get off our proverbial cans, clean that up a little bit, and do something, or everybody's going to go home. But I had those thoughts as I had the 9 hours, and I thought I'd share them with you. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 54th on the point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me start by saying I am as pleased about anything recently to hear my good friend from the 39th say that confrontation is not a strategy. So that enriches my spirit as we head to the weekend. I want to speak about personal experience first and say that I want to thank our friend, collective friend, the senator from the 7th, for providing me a home and shelter on a night I did not intend, nor plan, nor frankly prepare to be in Atlanta when I left my home in the mountains on Monday morning of this week. And as the senator from the 56th indicated, that is not a rare or unusual story about Georgians helping Georgians in the midst of difficult times. This morning, we have been encouraged by my friend from the 42nd in many ways that I frankly, candidly agree with, and I think most Georgians do. I do just want, for point of clarification, to address the issue of when a governor should declare a state of emergency. And I want to at least draw our attention to our good friends just next door in Alabama, who declared a state of emergency at 6 a.m. On Tuesday morning, many hours before we did in Georgia. And even with that declaration in place, had school children spending the night 2 nights in many schools in Alabama. And as estimates I've heard, had twice as many children stranded in schools as the state of Georgia. Now, I don't mean to throw stones at Alabama. They have their challenges and we have ours, and certainly they suffered in a storm and we suffered in a storm. But I think it's probably a little bit, sheds a little light on the story to say that having declared the state of emergency, doesn't really appear to be able to stop snow from falling from the sky. I also think that it's worth noting that the federal government has funded a study, the Metro Atlanta Urban Area Security Initiative, UASI, which was an organization new to me. But they have funded a study, and most of their activities have related to evacuations during good weather conditions. I can't find anything that indicates a weather crisis evacuation in Atlanta. But their study under ideal circumstances reflects a 7 to 9 hour evacuation of the city of Atlanta. That is a problem. I think we all recognize that is a critical issue for our capital city, even those of us who don't live here other than a few months out of the year. That's a problem. But it's a problem that existed well before this week, and certainly in light of that 7 to 9 hour time during good weather conditions, I think it puts perspective on what we have seen. My friend from the 39th, the whip, made an apology to school children, and I echo those sentiments. As a father, I am sort of, dismayed at the idea of children being on buses and being in schools. I do want to give special credit. On the evening of Tuesday, we had 99 buses in Georgia who were stranded as of midnight. That is to say, they were stuck somewhere in the weather. As of 1:30 a.m. Wednesday morning, that number was down to 45. And in the early morning hours, I believe the senator from the 30th his district may have had the last group of school children in Douglas County who were brought in from a bus. That work was done primarily by the Georgia State Patrol and the Georgia National Guard at the direction of the governor, as he set his #1 priority once the state of emergency was declared, as getting those children off of buses. Obviously, we did that as expeditiously as possible. I do also want to say about two things that my friend the whip, Minority Whip, said, would like to respond to specifically. First and foremost, as someone who had the great misfortune of being here in 2011 with many of you, and this week, I just have to say that I think the mayor of Atlanta is right in saying that there's not a real fair comparison. There were still issues, there were issues all week, but as somebody who's in Atlanta in both circumstances, I think the city proper of Atlanta is no way to compare the two events. And I don't think the weather probably was necessarily identical either. I do also want to point out with respect to the issue of towing, that the only vehicles that the towing process were in effect were those that the Department of Public Safety deemed to be a hazard to traffic or to the vehicle. They were towed at state expense. And all other vehicles stay in place until Sunday evening. And so that is after the expiration of the state of emergency. We started yesterday morning with 2,030 vehicles that were in a hazardous position on our roadways. By nightfall, all but 181 of those had been relocated, had been removed by the owner. So we're talking about a smaller number of vehicles than we started the day with, and hopefully by the end of the weekend we'll have all that taken care of. I thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Senator from 34th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise for some good news this morning. I am going to follow up behind the senator from the 33rd to let you know Senate Bill 287 is already in the works, and we don't have to wait 3 or 4 years down the road. We can go ahead and get that moving, and we can start some transit moving right here in Georgia. Good news number one. Good news number two, Clayton County Public School Systems interim superintendent made the wise choice of closing even on Tuesday. So we had 0 children affected by the storm. I am just up here to thank her personally for her leadership, for her call to make it a point to put children first. When I sent her a text letting her know I appreciate what she had done, because all over Clayton County, we knew it was coming from the South, which had been reported on the national and local news. We wanted to make sure, even in the furthest most of our school district, all kids were safe. So, two good news. We got a transit bill. I've already dropped it, Senate Bill 287, and Clayton County Public Schools made the right decision, and all of our children were at home safe with their parents. Thank you, Mr. President.
That concludes our points of personal privilege. The senator from the 31st still knows how to get me tickled there. All right. Privilege resolutions, we have a consent calendar that is before you. Should be on your desk. Is there objection to adoption of the consent calendar of privilege resolutions? Chair hears none. And the consent calendar of privilege resolutions are therefore adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw or commit? Mr. Secretary, are there any objections filed on any of the bills on the local consent calendar?
Mr. President, there are no objections filed in the Secretary's office.
Is there objection to agree in the Porter Committee on State and Local Governmental Operations, which is favorable to pass the bills on the local consent calendar? Chairs none. The Porter Committee is agreed to. Shall we now pass the local consent calendar? All those in favor will say aye, or excuse me, will vote yea. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. Voting on the local consent calendar. On the local consent calendar, the yeas are 47 and the nays are 0, and the bill on the local consent calendar is therefore adopted. Chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate stand in recess until it receives a message from the House on SB 297, then adjourn upon receipt of that message pursuant to H.R. 1108 until 10 a.m. Monday, February the 3rd.
Majority Leader has moved. Read the announcements.
Rules will be meeting upon adjournment in 4:50 cap. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Are there any other announcements? I know the the Appropriations Chairman will tell you subcommittees need to be working hard. We're a little bit behind on the budget, and we all need to work very, very hard to catch up so we can get that conducted this week or next week. The Majority Leader has moved that we stand in recess until we get SB 297, and then we will adjourn. All of those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, no. Ayes clearly have it. We stand adjourned. Wish you all a great weekend.